The life and exploits of Joan of Arc, the Maiden of Orleans. Historical context. The 100 Years' War, 1337–1453, was a long conflict between England and France, motivated by the dispute of territories and the succession rights to the French throne. Much of France was under English occupation or controlled by the allies of England, the Burgundians. The legitimate French king, Charles VII, who had not yet been crowned, met a kingdom completely fragmented. Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, also known as the Maiden of Orleans, is one of the most fascinating figures in the history of France. She was born on January 6, 1412, in Domremy, daughter of Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romay. A peasant family of humble origins, and despite not knowing how to read and write, Juana would become a key military and deeply religious leader in the 100 Years' War between France and England. His religious devotion. Juana's religiosity was a central aspect in her life. Since she was a child, she spent long periods of time in prayer. At the age of 13, she began to hear voices that she identified as San Miguel, Santa Catalina, and Santa Margarita. These gave him the divine mission of liberating France and bringing the Dauphin Charles VII to the throne. Although at that time it was common that the people were religious, her deep, unwavering faith distinguished her. His mission to liberate France. In 1429, at just 17 years old, he managed to convince Commander Roberto de Baudricourt to take him before Charles VII. After many doubts and distrust, Charles VII allowed him to lead an army to a key city, besieged by English forces, Orleans. On April 29, 1429, Juana arrived in Orleans, and on May 8th, she led the liberation of the city. This victory not only raised the morale of the French, but also made her a very popular figure. The coronation of Charles VII. After the victory of Orleans, Joan of Arc led the royal army in a series of triumphs that culminated in the capture of Reims, where, on July 17, 1429, Juana arrived in Orleans, and on May 8th, she led the liberation of the city. This victory not only raised the morale of the French, but also made her a very popular figure. The coronation of Charles VII. After the victory of Orleans, Joan of Arc led the royal army in a series of triumphs that culminated in the capture of Reims, where, on July 17, 1429, Charles VII was crowned King of France. This fact was crucial, since Reims was the traditional city of the French coronations and represented the legitimacy of the reign of Charles VII, his appearance and outfit. Interesting and revolutionary for her time was that Juana wore men's clothes during her travels and leading her army. It was very unusual and, in fact, was one of the main charges during his later trial. She justified this decision as a practical measure, since it allowed him to move more easily among the soldiers and at the same time better protect himself on the battlefield. He wore a full armor in combat, but he did not do it actively. But his mission was to motivate and inspire the troops and direct the strategies. He had innovative tactics despite his lack of military experience, but he showed a talent innate for strategy. Their tactics, although simple, were effective and surprised the enemy. His charisma and his contagious faith. They inspired her troops, who followed her with loyalty and devotion. Juana managed to unite a demoralized army and turn it into a formidable force. Character and determination. Juana was young, but her determination and strong sense of mission impressed both the political figures and the soldiers who accompanied her. When he appeared before Charlesville, he showed an unusual confidence for his age. According to the chronicles, he managed to convince Charles VII of his divine mission, and he revealed secrets that only he knew. This strengthened its credibility. In the most difficult moments, his leadership capacity and his strong belief that God was on his side motivated in an extraordinary way to its troops, often faced with larger and better equipped armies. Despite her important feats, Juana put aside her humility. She never claimed noble titles, political power, or any privilege. After the coronation of Charlesville, He simply asked to be able to return to his home in Domemi, humanity and austerity. Although Juana was a brave military leader, she always showed great sensitivity and compassion, both for civilians avoiding unnecessary deaths and for her own troops. Everyone was amazed to see Juana crying next to the wounded and dead on the battlefield, something unusual in the military leaders of that time. He always avoided the great feasts and luxuries that the high commanders could enjoy. "I ate bread and fruit and drank water," something curious at a time when wine was almost omnipresent. His relationship with Charles VI. Although at first the future King Charles VII was skeptical about Juana, but over time they developed a relationship of mutual respect. She always treated him with great reverence by addressing him as "my king," even before he was crowned. However, after the coronation in Reims, their relationship cooled. Some historians believe that the court and the king's advisors, they began to see Juana as a dangerous figure, both for her popularity and for her independence of thought. The symbolism of his banner and sword. Juana always wore a white banner decorated with images of Christ and lys flowers, the symbol of the French monarchy. He preferred his banner to his sword because his mission was God's. His sword was an object full of symbolism and meaning. It was a connection and a direct link with his divine mission. At a time when women had a very limited role in society, wielding a sword gave Juana an unprecedented power and authority. The capture and the trial. On May 23, 1430, while defending the city of Compiègne, it was captured by the Burgundians and subsequently handed over to the English. The trial was led by Bishop Pierre Cauchon, an ally of the English. She was accused of heresy and witchcraft, but also dress in men's clothes, crimes that at that time were punishable by death. Despite the tortures and pressures, she always remained firm in her beliefs. That size trial, it was a farce for interest politicians. The English and Burgundians wanted to eliminate that great figure that represented a serious threat to their plans. On May 30th, 1431, at the age of 19, she was sentenced to death and burned alive in the market square of Rouen. His last words were, "Jesus, Jesus," the legacy of Joan of Arc. Juana became a national symbol of French resistance and an example of patriotism. His story has inspired numerous artists, writers, historians over the centuries. 25 years after her death, in 1456, the church reviewed her judgment and declared her innocent, qualifying the process as corrupt. Juana was canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church in 1920. Almost 500 years later, she is still one of the patron saints of France. The impact on feminism. Although Joan of Arc lived centuries before the term feminism existed, her figure has been a source of inspiration for women throughout history. Juana defied the gender norms of her time by taking up arms and leading an army. However, the representation of Joan of Arc in popular culture has often been ambiguous. Some have reduced her to a stereotype of a submissive and devoted woman, while others have portrayed her as a rebellious and defiant figure. It has always been a source of inspiration for women who fight for equality and justice. Summary. In short,